Hey everyone, I'm Brett, and welcome to Nightwood Guns. I'm very excited about today's video because I get to talk about revolvers again, and with all the revolver videos I've been doing, many of you have asked what to look out for when buying a revolver because quality control has been abysmal on new revolvers, and it's understandable to be leery of used or pre-owned revolvers since, well, frankly, so many things can go wrong with them. So if you'd like a checklist of all of the little details to look for when picking up a revolver, whether it is a new one with potentially bad quality control or an old one that has been around the block a few times, we're going to touch on timing, cylinder gap, hammer push, all that stuff. So if you want, open up the Notes app on your phone or ready your pen to take some notes as we go along so you know what to look for. I want today's video to be short and to the point, so no sponsor or ad read. Just if you enjoy the video, make sure you hit that subscribe button, leave a comment down below, let me know what revolver you're looking at, and be sure to hit that like, thumbs up button. And a quick thank you to my patrons. I'm grateful for you guys. So hopping right into the video, the first thing that I look for is to make sure the barrel is properly aligned. Check for a canted barrel. Unless you're hopping into older wheel guns that have a pinned barrel, you can see the pin right there. These things are just threaded, screwed, and crush fit onto the frame. This should be pretty obvious to spot as long as you know to look for it in the first place. Just, kind of looking down the barrel, maybe looking at it across the top strap. And it doesn't hurt to look where the barrel meets the frame in this little crease right here, because if it was crush fit on sloppily, there can be some metal shavings kind of coming up right in that area there. So that's something else worth taking a look at as far as the barrel goes. Next up is one of the most important things to look for, and that is going to be the side plate screws right here. What you're looking for here is to see if those screws are marred up. And the reason for that is because if those screws are marred up, it means someone took the side plate off and likely monkeyed around inside the gun. And some people might think, well, what if the person knew what they were doing? What if they had an action job? If they knew what they were doing, they would have had the proper size screwdriver. It is a gunsmithing screwdriver. You need to have the right bit, so someone who knows what they're doing will not leave mars on the screws. That is a huge red flag, is marred up side plate screws. Next up is the thing that's most often talked about, which is the timing of the revolver. So to check this single action timing, all you're going to do is to very slowly cock the hammer on the revolver. So what you're checking for is that this little pin right here is dropping into one of these cylinder notches before the hammer is fully cocked. If it doesn't drop into that notch when the hammer is cocked, the timing is off. And timing is something that can be off on just one chamber, sometimes two or three, or all of them. So it's important to check every single chamber this way. So once again, we just slowly cock it. We hear a click there. That pin drops into the notch on the second click, and then the hammer locks back. And if you want, you can move the cylinder a little bit to make sure that it dropped into place. So this one right here is a 6-shooter. We'll do that 6 times just to make sure the timing is on every single chamber. Now, if the timing is off, it is something that can be fixed by someone who knows in depth exactly what they're doing. If it's 1 or 2 chambers, what they can do is they can actually smack one of the ratchets here on the cylinder in order to get the timing back in place. Really, the only guy I trust to do that is Nelson Ford at the Gunsmith Inc. And if the timing is off on the whole cylinder, then you can start playing around with fitting a different hand to the gun. The hand is this piece right here that goes into the ratchet and rotates the cylinder. So if you're like, oh, this is a 1 of 250 made rare Lou Horton, but the timing is off on 2 of the chambers, you don't have to turn it down. It's not like the gun is a paperweight. It can be fixed. I would just really recommend you send it to someone who knows what they're doing. Now, if you're looking at a hammerless revolver that doesn't have a hammer that you can cock, you can still check the timing in double action. And I actually recommend you test the timing in double action even on a hammered gun, because sometimes the timing can be different between single action and double action. So the way to test it on a double action revolver, well, first of all, it's helpful if the place you're at allows you to dry fire. But if you're not able to do that, you can still check it. So all you do is you slowly pull the trigger double action, and you see how the little pin dropped into the little notch on the cylinder there? That one's in time, and then you can just dry fire through it, and then on to the next chamber. Now, if they don't allow dry fire, maybe they'd be cool with you checking it this way. I certainly would not get anything if they wouldn't let me check this, but you can just slowly pull the trigger until that pin drops into the notch, and then you can just let it back out and go to the next chamber. Then let it out, go to the next chamber. And again, you want to make sure you're pulling it very slow. Next up, and I actually did catch this on a used revolver before, is we're going to check for hammer push. So we are going to cock the hammer and then just apply gentle pressure forward on the hammer to make sure it doesn't fall. I mean, it shouldn't fall even if you push it hard. It's just, older revolvers, sometimes you want to be careful applying too much pressure. Either way, apply forward pressure to the hammer when it's cocked, make sure it doesn't fall forward. Something else important to check is cylinder lockup and whether or not it has any end shake. So a lot of people will pick up a revolver and wiggle it around and say, oh man, you hear that? This thing's been completely shot out, but that's not how we really check that. What you want to do is either cock the hammer, or what I do is I will cock the hammer, pull the trigger, lower the hammer, and hold the trigger to the rear, and then wiggle the cylinder around. A little tiny bit of movement is acceptable. We just don't want any huge like ka-chunk, ka-chunk, ka-chunk movements. And of course, end shake, we want to keep holding that trigger down and move the cylinder forward and back. There should not be much play there at all. It should lock up tight. So on this Taurus here, for example, I'm just going to dry fire it since it's double action. I can't lower the hammer. There is zero end shake. This thing locks up very tight, but there is some side to side turning, and it's about as much as I would want on a new revolver. Like even on this Smith right here, there's still a little bit of play. That's totally okay. We don't want anything obvious like clunk, 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 clunk. The end shake is the really important thing to check on these guys. Next up is something we can only check if we're allowed to dry fire the revolver in whatever establishment you're in. We want to make sure the trigger properly resets and that it doesn't stick or bind. So the first thing we want to do is slowly pull it in double action to get an idea of how it feels. Make sure there's no hitches, no binding. And some people get a little anal about this, analyzing every little detail. If there's a hitch or a bind or it's sticking, it will be extremely obvious. It will just scream at you. Not every revolver is going to be buttery smooth, but if there's a problem, you're gonna know it. And then of course, we're gonna let it rip and make sure the trigger properly resets. I like to go slowly forward just to make sure it resets all the way. And then this is what you want to be careful not irritating the FUD behind the counter with. Make sure you have permission to do it. Dry fire this thing kind of fast. And just make sure everything is good, nothing's sticking, everything's resetting. So slow pulls and fast pulls. So the next thing we want to check is for a bent ejector rod. The ejector rod is right here on the cylinder. It's what you push down to eject your spent casings. So we're going to open up the cylinder and then spin it like this and watch the ejector rod to make sure it's not wobbling or oscillating at all. And again, don't get too hung up on the details. Like it might not be smooth. It might just be like just a little bit. We're looking for an actual wobble like this. So spin that sucker, and if it's not wobbling like this, you're good to go. Next up, we are talking about cylinder gap. That's going to be the gap in between the cylinder and the barrel right here at the top. Or if it's a Chiappa Rhino, it'll be at the bottom. Now this is kind of hard to explain, so I will just show you what cylinder gaps that are acceptable look like. It's something that you can absolutely eyeball. If it looks way too far apart, it's pretty obvious, and you also don't want it touching. A lot of people think the smaller the cylinder gap, the better, but if it's right up against the forcing cone in the barrel, if the cylinder face gets any kind of fouling on it, or maybe it doesn't even require fouling, the front of the cylinder will actually rub on the forcing cone. And if you do get carbon fouling on the forcing cone or on the cylinder, it will bind, it will rub, and you may not even be able to pull the trigger in double action. Now, if the gap is too big, you can also absolutely run into problems. Now, you can get little gauges and put them on a key ring and take them to your local place and check the cylinder gaps on everything to make sure they're good to go. But for the most part, this is something you can eyeball once you know what an acceptable cylinder gap looks like. Now, again, this is something that a guy like Nelson Ford at the Gunsmith Inc. can fix up. If you find some other rare Lou Horton model that you just can't live without, it's something that can be fixed. Something else to look for is sticky cylinders. So we want to push the cylinder release all the way in. Obviously, Colts are pull, Smiths are push forward, Rugers are push in, as are Kimbers. So we want to actuate the cylinder release all the way and then just open up the cylinder. And you can try that on different chambers to make sure it's good on every chamber, opening and closing it. And again, don't get too hung up on the finer little details like, oh, I think it might have been a little hard to open there. Like, if it's hard to open, you'll know it. Like when I got this Performance Center 586L comp, I would push it all the way forward and I would have to muscle it to break it out of there. The next thing is kind of a spooky zone of catastrophic things to keep an eye out for. If you're getting anything that's like an alloy or aluminum frame, check it over for cracks, specifically in this area of the frame right here underneath the barrel. I had an airweight J frame manufactured in, I want to say like 86, that developed a crack there very quickly. Now I know I was talking about alloy guns there, but it can still happen on steel guns, so it's worth checking the thing over, looking for any obvious cracks. Now it's kind of becoming a meme at this point that people think that the seam where the side plate meets the frame of the gun, both back here by the hammer and going along the side of the gun, people will think that's like a hairline crack. Just be aware that's supposed to be there. Now, if you're picking up an older K-frame guns, this will be like your Model 19s, your Model 66s. If it is not a new manufactured gun, if it's an older 19 or 66, or any of the K-frames, they actually have a flat cut in the bottom of the forcing cone here. And if someone put a lot of magnums through the gun, that flat spot on the bottom of the forcing cone can crack. It is the #1 thing you need to look for on these K-frames. On the new ones, they changed the design so they could have a fully round forcing cone that can take an infinite supply of 357 Magnum, but these older ones, that flat spot, you have to look for a split or a crack there. That is a catastrophic problem that you do not want to have to deal with. If you're looking at an older revolver that has wood grips, be sure to check that for cracks as well. Sometimes those can be pretty well hidden. People are good at hiding those cracks and repairing them. Another thing to look for is just dings, dents, scratches, any kind of cosmetic problems. Now this mainly applies to brand new revolvers because unfortunately, with the lack of quality control, a lot of these revolvers, including performance center guns, are coming out of the factory with scratches, finish blemishes, dings, dents, marring. It can get pretty gnarly. So I already mentioned to check where the barrel is crush fit for any kind of marring when they cranked it tight, but it's a pretty common sense thing to look for. On this 629 competitor here, I actually had a chip in the frame where the side plate meets the frame on this little seam there that I missed before I picked it up. It was a tiny little chip. So definitely take your time looking these things over. If you're buying an older revolver, a common spot I will see damage that's easy to miss is right here along the top strap of the frame. I don't know why, for some reason, people just like to smack that top strap into things. I'm not sure how, but definitely look for dings and dents in that area. Something else to look for is going to be dings or chips in the actual crown of the barrel. If it's in the crown where the rifling is going into the barrel, it can affect accuracy. If it's out here on the outside, obviously not a huge issue, but it's worth checking to make sure there's no gouge or ding actually going into the barrel on the edge of the crown. Next is going to be the sights, both the front sight and the rear sight. This is something that a lot of people will overlook. There will be like a canted rear sight. Maybe a corner of the rear sight will be busted off. The front sight can be chewed up, but sights just kind of stick up off the top of the gun. And if someone's handling this thing a lot, they can smack it into walls, car doors, who knows. The thing you should look out for on new revolvers is if it comes with tritium night sights, making sure that tritium vial still glows. So this is something that I overlooked twice now, and I smack myself in the head for it. So cup your hand over that tritium night sight to make sure it still glows. Yes, these will leave the factory with dead tritium. Now checking for rust may seem obvious, but sometimes it's trickier than you'd think. So especially on blued guns, checking the surface for any kind of pitting or rust is just common sense, but places you can miss rust are going to be under the grips. Most places probably aren't going to allow you to pop the grips off of a gun, but it'd be ideal if you could. But somewhere that you can absolutely check is inside the firing pin channel. That's where this particular piece of iron had it, was right in that firing pin channel. Just shined a light down there, saw the rust, and was pretty confident I'd be able to clean it up. But sometimes rust is good at hiding. If I hold this thing up, you would think this gun had no rust whatsoever, but you shine a very harsh light on it, and you can absolutely see where this thing used to have rust. Now, I've decided that this is not the end of the world on this particular piece because you cannot see it with the naked eye. Even in daylight, you have to shine a harsh light on it to see that little bit of hidden surface rust that's on the bluing. And I don't care what anyone says, 99% of the time it is worth just leaving it alone and letting it be, because you're probably just going to make it worse. If you cannot get it off with a silicone rag and something like REM oil and just rubbing it off, then it's best to just let it be if you care about the way it looks. And of course, it's also important to check for rust inside the barrel, so shine a little bore light down there or a flashlight. Get a look at the rifling while you're at it. Make sure the rifling is still strong, the grooves are obvious, and that there is no pitting or rust or rings, half rings, any weird dots or spots in there that don't belong. And this can be hard if it's a used revolver and the place hasn't cleaned it up and it's a dirty barrel. But luckily, even with a dirty barrel, you can typically see how strong the lands and grooves are in the rifling. Speaking of the barrel, something else worth mentioning is to look for bulges in the barrel, because maybe someone got a squib and then they fired another round, and so I've seen several bullets in a barrel one after another. They just kept firing like 38 special wad cutters one after the other, not realizing they were squibbing. So just run your fingers up and down the barrel, especially if it's an older gun, just to make sure there's no bulging in the barrel. Next is going to be cylinder notch peening. Now this is not the end of the world, yet it means the gun was probably either used hard or kind of abused. Or in the case of Taurus, maybe the metal is kind of soft. Like I said, this isn't really the end of the world, but it is a cosmetic blemish that's noticeable, so if that bothers you, it's definitely worth seeing if those cylinder notches are peening at all. Something minor to look for is wear from opening the cylinder incorrectly. So when you open the cylinder on a revolver, you want to push all the way forward. If it's a Ruger, you want to push it all the way in and then open it up. If someone got lazy hundreds of times and just pushed it kind of forward and crashed it out, there can be some wear on the face of the cylinder there where that little plunger is. Now, obviously this line right here from the cylinder going in and out, totally normal. Don't worry about that. We're just looking for any kind of oblong wear in the hole where that plunger rests. Next up is going to just be taking a quick peek at the firing pin to make sure it's still there. On an older Smith, for example, it's on the hammer. We got the little hammer nose here. Just make sure it's still there and it moves up and down as it should. Check it over, make sure it doesn't have any cracks or anything like that in it. On Rugers or newer Smiths, you're going to have to either cock it and lower the hammer and hold it, or just dry fire it and hold it to see if you can see the firing pin in there. Make sure it's still there and hasn't broken off. Something else important to check on something like a Ruger that has a transfer bar back here is going to be to make sure the transfer bar is still there. I have seen these transfer bars get pinched off. So that little transfer bar that comes up and covers the firing pin so the hammer can contact the transfer bar, which then contacts the firing pin, make sure that's still there. And finally, we can take a quick peek at the hand. That's going to be this slot right here. There's a little lever. That's what pushes up the ratchet in the cylinder in order to turn the cylinder. And you should be able to see it in there, make sure it looks okay. If you'd like to check it further, you can actually pull back and manually hold the cylinder release and then slowly cock the hammer in order to see the hand move to make sure it's not chipped or, has severe wear or anything like that. Now, it is normal to have a bit of a slant or a curve to it, so don't be worried if it's not like a perfectly rectangular lever. We're just looking for any obvious chips or extreme wear on the hand, and then just very gently and slowly lower the hammer while pulling the trigger. If you're not comfortable doing this and you don't want to make an idiot of yourself, in your local establishment, then you can totally skip this step. Chances are it's completely fine. Now, while checking those things can save you from trouble, sometimes there are things going on internally that you're just not going to catch until you actually shoot the thing. It turns out this 629 no dash right here actually had what's referred to as a gun show action job, and I should have seen it coming because the two side plate screws there were just ever so slightly marred. And again, if someone knew what they were doing, had the right screwdriver bit, there'd be no sign they were ever in there. But this thing was having light strikes, and it turns out I popped off the grips and saw that the hammer spring in there was like burned and filed down. It was a disaster. So if they'll let you take the grips off the thing so you can take a look at the hammer spring to make sure it hasn't been, severely messed with, that could have saved me on this. But I mean, the 629 no dash, kind of a rare thing with the pinned barrel and the recessed chambers. I wanted it anyways and knew that I could just put a new hammer spring in there and fix it up. But my point is, new or old, you can check all these things, get it out to the range, and then like the firing pin can break. So my advice for that is to make sure you put like 100 rounds through it and then dry fire it a few hundred times with snap caps to make sure that firing pin isn't going to break. It's usually a heat treat issue, so if it's going to break, it'll usually break pretty early. But those are the things that you should look out for when buying a revolver. If you're a revolver aficionado and I missed something, drop it in the comments down below to help people out. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you are subscribed. It helps out a lot, and hit that like, thumbs up button. If you'd like to directly support the channel, the links in the description below are the place to be. Thank you to my patrons who support me over on Patreon. I'm so grateful for you guys, and I'm just glad you've been enjoying the content. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's video, everyone. It was great seeing you again, and I'll see you in the next video. I'm Brett, and this was Nightwood Guns. Nightwood out.